Hi, I am Michael Santos with Prison Professors, still stuck in a hotel room in Lexington, Kentucky, but still committed to helping more people understand some of the complexities about the criminal justice system, and hopefully helping those individuals that are subscribers to this channel learn what they can do to prepare for the best possible outcomes, whether they're facing challenges themselves, whether they have a loved one inside, or whether they're on the other side of the journey. We're striving to provide as much information as we can. And today, what I'd like to talk with you a little bit about is the difference between resolving a criminal complaint at the criminal information stage versus a criminal indictment stage. And the reason I want to bring that up is because there are two defendants that are kind of in the news today. One of them is Jack Abramoff, who is somewhat notorious for being an influential lobbyist in Washington, D.C., maybe 10, 12 years ago. I remember I was in prison when he got in trouble, and several people got in trouble with him. And then what they got in trouble for was violating some of the laws pertaining to lobbying. So there are a lot of rules and regulations associated with that, and authorities convicted him of breaking those laws. So he served a few years in prison, and he's been home for about 10 years. But during those 10 years, he took a series of jobs, some of which brought him back into the crosshairs of the criminal justice system. And unfortunately for him, he was charged with a crime, and he was charged in the form of a criminal information. And I'm going to show you on the screen, so I'll probably have to pull myself off because I'm not in my home studio with a green screen behind me where I could be floating around. I'm just going to move myself off and show you the actual criminal information that Jack Abramoff pleaded guilty to. I will also show you what happened with his co-defendant, who did not get to plead guilty to a criminal information. Instead, a grand jury the prosecutors convened a grand jury, which is a panel of 12 citizens, I believe it may be 18. I think it's actually 18, up to 18 citizens who sit and listen to evidence that the prosecutor presents through various witnesses. And the members of the grand jury can then agree to issue an indictment on the individual. Now, the difference is there's a much higher amount of work, I think, for the prosecutor. You just have to even just imagine just convening a grand jury panel, presenting evidence. With an information, he doesn't have to do any of that. With a criminal information, he simply comes to some type of an agreement. This is going to be the charge, and the defendant can choose to plead guilty to the information, thereby sparing the prosecutor some of the work. And the purpose of an individual doing that is to negotiate some type of a favorable plea agreement. Well, Jack Abramoff had a level of experience in the criminal justice system because he already had gone through it. He'd been arrested, he was indicted, he pleaded guilty, he went to prison. He served his time on supervised release, and then he went on to build his career. So when he found out that he was in trouble again, he understood the best thing that I can do, knowing my situation, is to cauterize this problem. It's like you buy a stock and the stock is sinking. You've got to decide, is it time to just cut my losses and move on? And apparently that's what he chose to do. In contrast, his co-defendant, known in the indictment itself as their co-schemers, and the background and the government's version of events is that they were trying to launch a new cryptocurrency. And they made some misrepresentations to people. And by making those misrepresentations, they violated the law. But in the case of Jack Abramoff, his previous sentence precluded him from doing certain things. And it required him, like it requires any lobbyist, to file appropriate paperwork in Washington, D.C. I don't know if it's with the congressional office or somebody else. It's actually in the document itself, in the charging document itself. But he didn't do so. And he can't pretend that he didn't know that he was supposed to do so because he used to be a lobbyist. So he's a pretty sophisticated guy. I think the important takeaway here is that once an individual goes into the criminal justice system, that individual should expect and anticipate that he will always be under the watchful eye of government investigators. And he may say certain things that can result in an indictment for him that wouldn't result in an indictment perhaps for somebody else. So I'm going to look off the screen right now and take a look at the actual documents which I don't think on YouTube I can do a download, but you can certainly find these documents on the Prison Professor's website if you want to see them up close. So what I'm showing you right now is a criminal information. This was the charging instrument that the government used to bring a case against Jack Abramoff. And you see it's got a criminal case number CR200260. It's filed in the Northern District of California. It lists 2 counts. Count 1 is conspiracy, 371, and count 2 is Lobbying Disclosure Act. So those are 2 counts, one under Title 18, one under Title 2, and he's facing by statute a penalty of 20 years. But a penalty by statute is what the maximum he can get. It's not what he's going to get, particularly since he pleaded guilty to a criminal information here. And he is not in custody. So that's further evidence that the government is probably working with him in some capacity. So in this allegation, and it's only an allegation at this stage, actually not anymore because he pleaded guilty, I think, today, they're describing the actual crime here. And some of the criminal behavior includes misrepresenting to potential investors what stage of development this cryptocurrency was at the time that they were raising money. And so he should have known about this misrepresentations. It says here the defendant was a resident, it tells where he lived, how he came on board. It talks about the actual charge, his co-conspirator. This is the person who was indicted, Rowland Marcus Andrade. He was a resident of there, and he's the one that was the CEO of this company. He hired Abramoff to help him kind of pump up, bring awareness to the stock of this. It wasn't a stock; it was an ICO, an initial coin offering. So it had to do with cryptocurrencies, not an actual equity. But it didn't comply with the rules. The government chose to bring charges against him, and now he is going to be sentenced. He's going to go through the entire process. So now that he has pleaded guilty, the next step is going to be the pre-sentence investigation report, and that pre-sentence investigation report will precede a sentencing hearing for Mr. Abramoff. Yes. But you may want to look at this document if you are facing a challenge with the criminal justice system and recognize that as a result of sparing prosecutors some of the work and accepting responsibility early, that is one way to show that a judge that perhaps you are a worthy candidate for mercy or leniency. Now, this fella, the co-defendant, his name is Rowland Marcus Andrade. This one, as you can see now, he faces several counts: wire fraud, aiding and abetting, money laundering, forfeiture allegation. And this is the typical path to an indictment. If you push the government to the test, or if the government chooses to convene a grand jury and get an indictment, you may face more serious charges, and you may face a more serious sentence if you plead guilty. I don't know the status of this fellow, of whether he has pleaded guilty or chosen to go to trial. But you see here they call them co-schemer A. That, of course, would be Abramoff, because he is mentioned in the criminal information. So these are some of the technical terms that you approach when you go into the judicial system. The sooner you can resolve a matter, the more likely you are to get some type of leniency. But it's also important for an individual to be thinking about what can he do to mitigate his situation. And I don't know anything about these individuals. Of course, I've not spoken with them. I've never worked with them. I just happened to be perusing the Department of Justice website, and I found this news press article about Abramoff, which is of interest to me because I'm always interested in seeing why people who have gone through the system can be brought back into the system. And I make no statement one way or the other on his guilt or on his innocence. What I will say is that anybody who's in the system, there are collateral consequences to having gone through it once, and those consequences mean that you're always going to that authorities will always look at that individual, and you don't have the same presumptions that somebody who hasn't gone through the system have had. On the flip side, a guy like Abramoff, he knows the system because he has been dragged through it, and he may have a sense of what steps he can take to mitigate himself prior to sentencing, which may be one of the reasons that he was successful in negotiating a plea to a criminal information rather than pushing prosecutors to the test of having to bring witnesses before a grand jury. Now, it's not terribly difficult for prosecutors to persuade members of a grand jury to return an indictment because there's no defense. The defendant is not there. There's no defense attorney there to represent him. It's just evidence, and those members of the grand jury are listening to the prestige of the United States Attorney's Office saying, we believe this person has committed a crime. We would like to indict him and take him to trial. And they will ask for an indictment. And that is what happened here. That's why this individual, Mr. Andrade, is one of the reasons that Mr. Andrade may face a more difficult task, besides the fact that his co-schemer, Abramoff, may very well be cooperating against him in exchange for a lighter sentencing plea. So if you are facing these challenges with the government, the more you know about the system, the more effectively you may be able to communicate with a defense attorney, the more effectively you may be able to make decisions. Make good decisions. Learn as much as you possibly can, not only about the judicial system, but also about what follows and what you as an individual can do to mitigate your situation, and hopefully get a judge and a jury, a judge or a judge and a jury, to see you in the way that your family sees you, in the way that the people who know you best see you, and not only the way that prosecutors see you. Understand that this system is really about convictions, and sometimes that pursuit of a conviction can trump the pursuit of justice, particularly if it's a high-profile case. So learn what you can, do what you can. Understand that despite decisions that you have made in the past that may have put you into the crosshairs of struggle and difficulty, you can start making decisions today that will put you on a pathway to a better outcome. Nothing can change the past, but you have the power within to change your future, and I hope that you do. And if you like this kind of information, I do hope that you will subscribe to the Prison Professors program. We produce content every day, always striving to teach and inspire people who are either going into the system, family members who have loved ones in the system, or people who are in the system themselves through our courses that we offer inside of jails and prisons across America. And of course, people who have come home who really need to learn what steps can I take to really disrupt the narrative and become more successful, even though I've gone through this system. That's what we do at Prison Professors, and we do hope that you will subscribe. And if you are interested in CBD products, I hope that you'll support our sponsor at cbdtv.com. I launched that company along with several other people with hopes of generating resources so that we can continue producing digital content every single day. And I'm producing this content today inside of a hotel room in Lexington, Kentucky, where I'll be for a few more days as part of our work in trying to improve outcomes of the criminal justice system for the people with whom we work on a one-on-one basis. But you can help yourself just by watching these videos. Best to you. I'm Michael, and thanks.